Got it. Thank you, James.
Yeah, and I am recording this, so I'm actually going to start over because we want to record this so we can post it. So, welcome to Parks and Recreation in Indiana. This is a series of presentations exploring the wonders of the natural world across Indiana, sponsored by Southwestern Indiana Historical Society. Today, we are going to explore Shade State Park and Pine Hill Preserve, and I have a couple of little extras at the end. The history of the development of the parks and wilderness reserves in Indiana starts with Richard Lieber, considered the father of the state park system. He was a businessman and a social activist. He was a German immigrant that moved to Indianapolis in 1891. From 1917 to 1933, he held public service positions. He was the first director of the Department of Conservation, today known as the Department of Natural Resources. He helped to create the Indiana State Park System in 1916. He did this by developing a mindset of conservation of natural habitats, hence the name, Department of Conservation. He also used models like the federal and other state programs, such as Yellowstone in 1872, started by President Grant, and the National Park Service, which was started by President Wilson in 1916. Maine, New York, California, and Michigan were all creating park systems around this time. He served on the committee for Indiana State Centennial Memorial, which he used as a platform to get the park system started. Welcome to Shade State Park. Shade State Park is located about 17 miles southwest of Crawfordsville, Indiana, just off of State Road 47. It is favored for hikers and canoeists. It's about 3 hours from Evansville. Shades is small, but often described as a peaceful park, a little jewel of the park system. The park started with around 3,000 acres and has slightly over 3,500 acres today. We'll talk more about these features later in the program. It was once known as Shades of Death Park. It was formerly a private lake resort, and at one time the property included a private airplane landing strip. Also adjacent to the property is Pine Hills Nature Preserve, which affords spectacular topography for those who are willing to take the long hike. The park features a variety of trails from easy to very rugged. Notice that 6 of the 10 trails are rugged. The park offers picnicking spaces, shelter houses, and campgrounds, although primitive camping only. The 6 Ravine Challenge is at Shades. This small but mighty park offers much for those who go. If you enjoy the ups and downs of rugged hiking, you can travel through the 6 ravines at Shade State Park. Climb ladders, enjoy beautiful vistas, and chase down a waterfall or two. Plan on 2 to 3 hours to complete the 4.5-mile challenge. Although be warned, portions of the hiking challenge may be impassable after large rainfalls. And there's a map of the 6 Ravine Challenge. Before settlers came to Indiana, the area was populated with Piankashaw and Miami Native Americans. The heavily forested canyons and ridges made for excellent hunting grounds. Originally, the park was called Shades of Death, and that was due to the hemlock forests that surrounded the park. It was a popular resort that was started in the 1880s. The mineral springs attracted many travelers over the years and gave birth to many of the names of the landmarks, such as the Devil's Punch Bowl and Maidenhair Falls, just to mention a few. In the 1880s, the Garland Dells Mineral Springs Association purchased a large tract that included the 3 major springs and surrounding area. Over time, they would add wood-framed hotel, cabins, and wood-floored tent platforms. It was built to accommodate up to 200 people. In 1909, the entire resort was purchased by Joseph W. Friz, father of Shades. Until his death in 1939,
unavailable.
Until his death in 1939, he protected the reserve from logging and agricultural development and added over 2,000 acres to the resort grounds. While the resort offered more activities like dancing, movies, and concerts, these were restricted to a small area around the cabins and the pavilion. It was often called the Yosemite of Indiana in travel brochures. Under Frizz, the natural areas in the park were preserved. And although, as I said, there was camping and group activities, he kept it confined to a small area in order to keep the forest as pristine as possible. In 1935, Frizz allowed the federal government to use a portion of the camp area to house the members of the Civilian Conservation Corps. They worked with area farmers on erosion and soil conservation, but they did not do any work in the park proper, as it was not officially a state park yet.
Again?
After Frizz passed away, lumber companies were trying to get the family to sell the property. Fortunately, the park was so popular that individuals and businesses worked together to secure the park from logging. An Indianapolis businessman, Arthur Baxter, created a holding company to keep the funds until enough was raised through private subscriptions to purchase the land. Indiana's conservation clubs were responsible for raising the money through grassroots efforts. This is a pamphlet from 1941 Drive to create the park. Notice there are only 14 parks listed. Among them are Indiana Dunes, Spring Mill, and Brown County, just to mention a few. After becoming the 15th state park in 1947, the state continued to run the hotel, but it was demolished in the 1960s. By the 1980, all the old buildings were gone. This is one of the original cabins from the Garland Mills Association. That was the entrance to the resort park in the 1800s and early 1900s. And there's a picture of the hotel that was built. One unique and interesting feature at the park is the Roscoe Turner flight strip. Kenneth Marlin, head of the Department for Conservation in the late 1950s, early 1960s, wanted to build an airplane landing strip at the edge of the park. He was a pilot himself. And even though many in the state and in the department were against it, he managed to get it built. It even included a pilot's cabin. It was rarely used. And by the 2000s, it's not even shown on the maps anymore. I remember the landing strip when I used to go to this park, but I could find no pictures of it, which is a good thing. Shade State Park remains the least developed park in the state. As I said, camping is primitive only, no electrical, although there is one shower and a modern restroom building on the grounds. Now we're just going to take a look at a few of the features of the park. Many rugged ravines up and down. And there you see a view of the park at the edge of Sugar Creek. Wonderful geological features. And here's Canoe Island. Canoers can camp there overnight. Rangers used to stock it with firewood, in fact, although I'm not sure if they still do that. This, of course, is Maidenhair Falls. And no park would be complete without Lover's Leap. That's the view from the edge of Lover's Leap, looking down onto Sugar Creek. And that's actually the original Lover's Leap before they built the wooden structure. And of course, Inspiration Point, which affords beautiful views of the valley below. The The picture on the right is an example of the hemlock trees that grow around the park. It has many waterfalls and lots of trails. This is called Box Canyon because of the slice between the rocks. And I love this picture. This is either side of one of the main canyon walks. And of course, it has trails that go through the meadows and the uplands as well. These are some pictures of Sugar Creek, showing how canoers love to travel through Shade State Park. I can't stress how beautiful the views are. This is also a wonderful place to go camping or hiking in the winter, where you get spectacular frozen icicles reaching down over the canyons. That's one of the picnic areas. And that's one of the original millstones from the old mill that used to sit on the other side of the park. These are some lovely postcards. This one shows the Devil's Punch Bowl. And there's another picture of the punch bowl when the water level is low. And you can actually walk up to the very bottom of the punch bowl. Spectacular bluffs. And quiet little secluded getaway spots as well. These are some postcards that show different views of the park. I tried to research Rock River. I believe that was a former name for Sugar Creek before it was renamed Sugar Creek. I love this picture of the Devil's Punch Bowl because that road was never built over the punch bowl. It's one of the problems with postcards. Sometimes they're a little more idealized than actual. And the Lonesome Pine looking out over the canyon. As I mentioned, it's a wonderful place if you can get out in the winter time and get down into the bottom of the canyons. It's always been one of my favorite parks in Indiana. The picture on the right is actually the top of the Devil's Punch Bowl. It offers playgrounds and wonderful sunrises and sunsets. On the north side of Sugar Creek, the major creek that runs along the park, is the Rock Pedestal Preserve. This part of the park is closed to the public. The DNR is using it to learn about natural, undisturbed nature preserves for better conservation practices for all the state parks. But it does offer some beautiful sandstone cliffs and numerous shady ravines to provide a beautiful backdrop for your journey down the creek. This covered bridge is just north of the park. The Deers Mill Bridge derived its name from the flour mill and the woolen mills, which were located there. Jesse Clore stated that the ancestral name of his mother was Deer, and that's how the bridge got named. In 1878, the bridge was built by J.J. Daniels. There are 89 historic covered bridges in Indiana, and 14 of those were built before 1870. Pine Hill Nature Preserve was the first nature preserve in Indiana. It was donated in 1961 and dedicated in 1968. The reserve offers beautiful vistas from over 200 feet above Sugar Creek. This is called the Devil's Backbone Ridge. No one knows when the figure was carved, but it's been there for a very long time. Now, I'd like to show you a short video to give you a sense of how tall these ridges are. Are you seeing the video?
Nope.
No.
I was afraid of that. Okay, hang on a second.
Ah, there we go.
One of my former students took this video and sent it to me. It really gives you a sense of how narrow the ridges are and how tall. I think they're on Turkey Back Ridge. And I can tell you from personal experience, I would not get that close to the edge when I was up on those ridges. Almost makes you dizzy. Next, I'd like to introduce you to two other parks on opposite ends of the state, but certainly worth the travel. The first is Clifty Falls in Madison, Indiana. It's about 3 hours east of Evansville, and it sits along the Ohio River. For many years, the park consisted of a little over 600 acres, which included the falls, the largest canyon, and the immediate upland rim. In 1965, the park was more than doubled in size by the acquisition of an adjoining upland fields from the Madison State Hospital. The old field area has provided the space needed for modern recreational demands. The city of Madison and the Ohio River Valley make up a panoramic scene from the Clifty Inn. These are pictures of the Big Clifty Falls. Here are examples of the beautiful trail work done by the CCC. In 1853, the Madison and Indianapolis Railroad Company began work on a railway, which was to have run west from Madison, then up the Clifty Creek Canyon to Dean's Branch to connect with a mail line about 1 mile north of Madison. These two tunnels were known as Browse Tunnel or Browse Folly. They were planned for a 4 3/4 mile line. The lower tunnel was barely started, and the excavation of the upper tunnel, which traverses the cliff just south of Tunnel Falls, was in progress when financial problems made it necessary to suspend the operations. Portions of the park's hiking trails follow the original grade, and several piers and trestle abutments may still be seen today. When you're standing at these tunnels looking out over the cliff edges, all you can think to yourself is, exactly where did they think the train was going to go? The park also offers its own inn, the Clifty Falls Inn, complete with all the modern conveniences. The next park I'm going to show you is at the opposite end of the state. This is the Indiana Dunes National Park. This is a U.S. national park, and it's located in southwestern Indiana. It's managed by the National Park Service, and it's about a 5-hour drive from Evansville. It sits on the shoreline of Lake Michigan. It was authorized, the shoreline was authorized by Congress in 1966 as the Indiana Dunes National Lakeshore, and was redesignated as the nation's 61st national park on February 15th of 2019. It's hard to believe that you're standing in Indiana when you're up at the dunes. And for the last couple of decades, the state has been working diligently to save the grass that you see in this picture. That's dune grass, and it helps to hold the sand embankments in place. It was endangered of going extinct from so much travel, but the state has worked very hard to help bring the grass back. Another interesting fact about this area is that at one time in the 1800s, it was famous for the Hemingway blue glass insulators, and other manufacturers used the sand from this area for plate glass and more. Just before the turn of the century, glass makers discovered that the sand in the dunes was perfect for making glass. And due to the minerals in the sand, the glass was a beautiful shade of blue. Over the following 30 years, from 1890 to 1920, 13.5 million tons of sand were shipped from this site to glassmakers in nearby cities. The picture on the left is the Hoosier Slide at Michigan City. Was at Michigan City. This is another view, and there they are excavating it. And this is what the site looks like today. But Dunes offers a variety of activities: swimming, hiking, camping. It's truly a one-of-a-kind spot in Indiana. Once Indiana had many natural peat moss bogs. Today, precious few are left in the state. This is Pinhook Bog at Dunes, the larger of the bogs. Rare orchids grow there, the lady slipper, and blueberry bushes. Sometime in the 1980s, the park had to restrict this area to guided tours only because people were cutting and digging up the natural florals. Today, the bogs are making a great recovery. And there's a spectacular aerial that shows the bogs, the woods, and the beach line. With the white caps on Lake Michigan, you would almost think you were in Florida. I love this picture with the woods in the back and the sand blowing off the dunes. Truly a place to remember. As I said, this is first of three, or this is the third installment in the Parks and Recreation in Indiana. And if you'd like to view the others, they're available on the Willard Library YouTube channel, and I've provided links. And I will post this one after tonight's presentation. Thank you very much. And if anyone has any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them.
Yeah, well, what about renting a canoe on the creek up at Shades?
Yeah, so there are a couple of canoe routes, and they have where you can rent the canoe on one end and canoe down. There's either a 2-day trip or a 1-day trip, and then they'll actually pick you up at the end spot and take you back to your vehicles on the north side.
Right.
But there's one right there at Deer Mill Bridge. That's the 1-day. And if you go further up the river up by Turkey Run, there's another place, and that's a 2-day.
Right. That'd be great.
Yeah, I've canoed down the Sugar Creek several
Yeah.
times, had a great time, at least a few of those. You definitely want to go when we've had rain.
Water's
because
up. Yeah.
There's a lot of portage if the rain levels are low.
Yeah.
One year they actually closed it. We'd had so much rain that they had to close the canoes.
Anybody else? We have any other questions for Jennifer?
I hope
Well,
I've
thank you
shown you
very much.
something you haven't
And
seen.
again, especially for doing the first one, Jennifer. That was great. Thank you.
Not a
Jennifer,
problem.
was there any opposition? Historically, back in the 20s, 30s, and so on, to the establishment of state parks?
No, 1916, there was quite a revival around the Indiana Centennial. And the whole theme of the centennial was kind of this looking back at our pioneer days with the inspiration and aspirational, which helped to revitalize this whole idea of preserving areas that were close to what it would have looked like when the pioneers were here. So it's actually a pretty successful campaign. There are only a few parks early on that Indiana actually paid for. McCormick's Creek, Turkey Run, Shades, many of the others, the funds were actually raised by private donations, which is pretty impressive.
I had a couple of comments.
Mhm.
Back in the 70s, when I was younger, I was with a camping organization. I spent a lot of time in that area. It's really, really neat stuff.
It's beautiful.
Both at Shades, and there's a boys club camp next to there. I did
Mhm.
get on the creek a number of times. And also I've been on the Pine Hills thing. Those backbones are really amazing. You go out there and all of a sudden you're dropping on both sides like a sidewalk in the sky.
Yeah, you come out of the woods and it's like one step and then suddenly you're on the ridge.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's also an old novel that was written by somebody who lived during the Civil War about copperheads and Governor Morton. It's all set in the Sugar Creek Valley. It's called Nice and Tusty by Carolyn Brown. I actually did an article that used that as a way of getting into the Republican ideology, believe it or not. And it's a really great read.
Well, and Sugar Creek initially got its name from an Indian term because they called it Sugar Creek because of the trees that grew along it. And I've tried to research Rock River because honestly, I've never heard of Rock River before.
Yeah, it was originally called Rock River.
Was it?
They
Okay.
tried to take a steamboat up there one time, believe it or not. I've been in the canoes, and it's hard to believe you would do that, but yeah.
Well, the watershed's much different today too, though.
Yeah.
I mean, at one time, flatboats were on Big Cynthiana Creek, and today it's nothing but a large drainage ditch. So,
Yeah. One caveat about Clifty Falls, I spent part of my honeymoon there. My wife's still complaining, so it's not a great honeymoon spot, but otherwise it's a great place to be.
the nice thing about Clifty Falls is if you go when the water level is low and you hike down to the bottom of the canyon, you can
Mhm.
actually hike up to the bottom of the falls,
Yeah,
which you obviously can't do if the river's up. It's just much too dangerous. It's huge boulders, right? And but
Yeah.
it's so much fun to stand at the bottom of those falls.
yeah.
Oh, anyone here knew about the dunes before my presentation, or
Yeah.
maybe I should say, is the dunes new?
I've been there. They're pretty amazing too. I was there once in a storm coming up about 40-mile-an-hour winds. That was even more amazing.
Oh my gosh.
Well, the last family that owned a home on the lake shore there in the park just moved off of it about 2 or 3 years ago. People who had homesteads there when the park was designated were given life leases. But then they had to sign the property over to the state when they either passed away or moved. And the last couple, they just moved off the property like 2-3 years ago. Which is pretty fun. If you ever go to dunes, you definitely want to go early because they will close the park down when so many people get in the park. This is part of that conservation effort to save the grasses and the bogs. The bogs were almost decimated at one point. And they've really worked to bring them back. They are beautiful. Although take your mosquito repellent because
There used to be a hotel there at the dunes.
the hotel is closed. The building itself is used as kind of like a pavilion. But you can't actually rent rooms there anymore. You can still camp at dunes. There is still camping there. So it's a lot of fun.
And the power plant ruins the view at Clifty
Oh.
Falls Hotel.
Yeah. Well, you know, some things people just have to discover for themselves. Although I can tell you that Madison has this amazing restaurant that's half Mexican and half sushi.
Yum.
I know, but it's delicious food in Madison, Indiana. It's a little mind blowing. Clifty also has a big boat race every year. The regatta, the Ohio Regatta boat race, which unlike the one here in Evansville, Thunder on the Ohio, the regatta still takes place up at Madison.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I
I've got a
encourage you
really-
all to wander Indiana.
I've just got a really dumb question. Is glass still made with sand? And if it is, where does the sand come from for American bottle making?
That's a really good question. As far as I know, glass is still made with sand, but it doesn't come from northern Indiana anymore.
No, the Owens Corning ware is up in Gas City, Indiana. And I worked out, when I was roofing, I worked up there on that facility and they were manufacturing glass Corning ware with huge
Mhm.
furnaces.
They could be taking sand, I suppose, out of Lake Michigan, out of the lake itself. They do have to dredge the harbor every now and again to keep it clear. But that Hoosier Slide and those huge mounds outside of what the Dunes Park is, those are all gone. They don't exist anymore.
There was a big gas boom in northern Indiana in the early part of the century that led to Ball and the rest of them relocating to that area because of the natural gas availability, and so be close to the sand there too, I guess.
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. In fact, that's where Gas City gets its name because that's
Right.
not its original name.
Gas City is not the original name?
No, I can't remember, and I should. Shame on me because I talk about it in Indiana history. Dad, do you remember what the original name was?
No, I really don't. I always thought it was Gas City.
No, it was renamed Gas City after the gas boom hit. Of course, it lives less than 20 years and they've tapped all the gas and it's gone. Although the Ball brothers stay in Muncie, Indiana, even after the gas is gone. You know, down here in Evansville, they built that archway over Main Street. And that is from a picture of one that was in Evansville a long time ago. And that was a gas torch, a flambeau gas torch. And originally it had flames that shot out of the sides with the gas. So I think it's really funny that they put that back because they probably didn't know what it was. Oh, Harrisburg was the original name. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Gas City, yeah. Yes, it's ironic. We bring things back from the past, but we may not always understand why they were there. Can you imagine walking down the street with natural gas torches? Just
No.
at Muncie, Indiana, you know, middle of the day, and it looks like it's midnight because there's so much soot in the air from all of the torches.
Wow.
Very wasteful, that's for sure. Well, thank you, everybody. I
Well, thank
really
you,
enjoyed
Jennifer.
this.